Hi, welcome to another edition of Dr. Bickmore's Why Wednesday Interviews. And today my guest author is the wonderful Alda P. Dobbs. And Alda and I have recently become friends, probably last April, maybe, or something like that, when we were reviewing applications for people to do presentations at the UNLV Summit. And we were looking through some things, Gretchen Rumer and I and Sarah Donovan, and we went, wait, these are authors. Well, why don't we invite them to come and do an author panel? And so it was really great that you guys were interested in doing that. And then Alda became kind of, for Streamline, not for anything because she's better or bigger than all of these people, but she became the contact person for the people that we talked with. And so we've had a chance to chat several times, and they did a wonderful job at the summit, and Alda and some of the others also helped us comment and reflect on different parts of the summit. I hope it was a great experience for you.
It was for the whole group. You know, it was amazing. And again, we can't thank you enough. It was Margie, Margarita, and Maria, Daniel, and Payal. Yeah, we still chat about you every time we get together. How amazing that experience was. So appreciate it.
No, we'll make sure there's a link to what you guys did when we post this interview online, and so people can look up and see everybody else. And yeah, it was wonderful. So Alda has a book that's coming out. Its release date is September 14th, and I was lucky enough to get a copy. It's called, and my copy may not show up because I don't have my green screen as good, but she can show you.
Here.
The Barefoot Dreams of Petra Luna.
Yes.
And I got a copy, and wow, I immediately put it to the front of my to read list because I knew that I was having this interview, and I'm becoming a nighttime reader. That's, I've been so busy during the day, so that when you get old, I don't sleep as much. So I may go to bed at 10 and then get up at midnight. But I read this book in 2 nights, and not, I'm a pretty fast reader, but the second night I was compelled to finish. I was, I thought, wow. So this book, I think, is just absolutely perfect for middle grades kids and for upper elementary kids that are good readers. And I think you add to a growing body of own voices literature about the Mexican heritage and several of the, we think that Mexican Americans, maybe we don't think about the waves in which they came here. We also don't think about the fact that, we took a large portion of their country, and there were always kind of Mexican Americans here, right? For generations, some who had land grants, right? And so those things. So this book really, it opened my eyes to a couple of things, because I think I'm fairly well read, and I thought I could do some things, and I thought, oh. And for those people that don't know, this takes place shortly after the turn of the century in the Mexican Revolution. And it helps people like me who are kind of interested in history contextualize that wonderful period of turmoil and uneasiness and migration and that. And I was kind of unaware of that. And I would like you to kind of walk us through a little bit of the timeline of the Mexican Revolution, because people think that was kind of over, right? And then it wasn't over. And then it was Pancho Villa back in charge, or trying to be in charge. And so the difference between what we would call rebels versus the federales was problematic. So do you want to tell us about kind of your journey to research and explore that? How much of it was research and how much was family oral history? So tell us a little bit about that, because I was fascinated with what you did.
No, well, again, thank you for having me here. I'm excited about the book, and I'm excited to share about it as well. And yes, the Mexican Revolution is very complex. It's something that I heard a lot in stories, family stories growing up as a kid. But when I started school in America, I never found books about it. So I would always ask my grandparents and my mom and any family member who could tell a story, and also to the songs. There's a lot of music and corridos, those folk songs that came out during that era. So, and they all have their own story. So I'd always be tuned into those, trying to read the lyrics and trying to find out why that lyric came about. But yeah, it was a very complex one, and it did have an official start, which was in November of 1910. It had a particular date and time. And now the argument is about when did it end? A lot of people claim, yeah, it lasted 3 years or 10 years. And some people say that it hasn't ended, that it's still going on as we speak, that the inequalities still exist and there's still people trying to fight that. So, it's up to the reader to decide that. And a lot of my research, yes, came from family stories, but a lot of it I had to dig in and read a lot of academic books that broke down the Mexican Revolution, because it is very complex. You're trying to follow all these faces, and it's amazing how it was kind of reminded me of Game of Thrones. Everybody's trying to get to that power, to that chair. So it was very interesting to see all that dynamics. And you read a lot about, like I said, the political figures, the war figures, but you don't really get the sense of the people, what they went through, especially the children. And that was my thing. There's a couple of nonfiction books that people wrote about their experiences as children, and the details, it gets really scary because it's a wartime. So I wanted something that would explain or show what a child went through, but enough that it would be, for middle grade students, that they would understand the war, but not have to see how bad it is. Because the book itself is not gentle, it is wartime, but it was a challenge trying to navigate those waters, to try to show the war to the young readers, but not overwhelm them.
Yeah, it's realistic, but it's not a gruesome dive into details, right? Yes. And for people that are worried about it, you don't need to have a full understanding of the revolution to read the book. It'll grow on you as you go. And you also provide a really good timeline at the end of it. So for people that say, oh, wait, maybe I'll jump and read the timeline and see where I am at and all this. And I love project-based learning. And so in my mind, I was thinking, oh yeah, you could have one group discuss, look up information about the Federales, and one group look up about Pancho Villa, and one group look up, some of the areas right along the border, were certainly had a different impact than they were further down in the country. And you might even ask, well, what did the people in the South do? Were people fleeing south as well as fleeing north? So I had all these questions, and I would love students today, spread out some names and say, well, what can we find out, right? And what other stories can we tell from that period? And like you said, researching the songs, the corridos, from the period would be fascinating to do that. I think here in Las Vegas, there's several schools that have pretty high quality mariachi bands as part of their school music program, right? And and I'm wondering how many of those corridos they know or they practice. And I think, it would be really interesting in a highly Latinx school with that kind of heritage to have a book like this that they could research. And there are plenty of others to do. You could pair this with Esperanza Rising, and people who read that would say, oh, well, this is a different version of a story from a similar time period, right? So great job on doing all the research.
Oh, thank you. It took years, but we got it here. And if you go to my website, I do have resources that give activities in bilingual. It's in English and Spanish, and it gives different activities students can do, from building a shrine, like the way the military, the rebel camp soldiers, the soldaderas, the followers would build. Every time they went to a new camp, they would build a shrine to honor the dead and the living that they didn't know about. And so I have that activity. There's also a playlist that has the corridos and the waltz that were.
So when we run this, we'll make sure to run the link to your website across the bottom of the screen too, and place it in the blog post that we do. But this was really one of those fun reads. And for a teacher thinking of, if a middle grade school is doing combined social studies and English, this is a gift. It's just a dream for somebody to be able to say, oh, wait, project-based learning, we can do all, let's see, does Dewey enter the classroom still? Yeah, he certainly should. But I thought it was just, kind of a wonderful, and I think it's a wonderful first novel. It's you've got it coming through Source Books, who I think has a wonderful group, and I'll be sure to send them an email and say, hey, if you're not pushing this book, you're missing the boat, because I think it's wonderful. So
Yeah.
now let's talk a little bit more about, and you've sent me some interview questions that I asked you, and you've written your responses, and we'll put those in the blog post. So I'll leave some of those questions to the side for people to read, but I would like you to tell me a little bit more about your own journey as a reader, coming to a new country, and as a writer. So, those are kind of two questions. So who are you? Who's Alda as a reader, as a child, right? And now as a reader, who are you?
Well, I migrated. I was born in Mexico, northern Mexico, and then I came here as a child and started kindergarten here, but I didn't speak a word of English when I started. And everything at home, the neighborhood, everything was in Spanish. It took about 3-4 years for me to start picking up the language. It was so difficult to me. It still is. It's a very difficult language. But I've always loved stories and storytelling. So it's something, a notion I had inside me, but that love-hate relationship I had with English always dampened those dreams. Not until I was in high school, I remember, because that's another thing, I was a reluctant reader because of that difficulty I have with English. But in high school, I came across a book someone had left in the public bus. I was writing it from work to home, and it was Catcher in the Rye. And I remember looking at it and, looked a little beat up. And when I said, I'll take a look, I'll take a read. And oh my goodness, I was just blown away. I was Holden, I was looking at that. I'm like, I'm Holden Clougher, that's me. I relate to this character so well. And yet we were so different, it was trying to help my single mom, working full-time while going to high school. And this kid was a wealthy kid from the Northeast, yet we had so much in common. And I said, this is magic. I want to do this magic one day. And when I got to college and took my entrance or placement exams, I scored remedial for English. And I said, you know what, that's a sign. It's probably not meant to happen. It's great, and I pursued science and physics. But I kept that in the back burner. I figured, you never know, one day. So I continued to read and whatnot. And 10 years ago is when I said, you know what, that's it. If I have to do it, I got to do it now. Otherwise, life's going to slip away. And I'm never going to get that out of me, out of my heart. So yeah, I took the plunge and decided to start writing. And it was a challenge because I had always trained my mind to think analytically and not for engineering physics. So I really had to start digging into books and reading them. And like I mentioned in the interview questions about dissecting.
Yeah.
So I approached it in a scientific way. And I took books, for instance, I took this wonderful book, Chains.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful book. So I said, okay, how does she do it? So it was books like these that taught me, how to get started. And if you look at all the margins and the highlights and highlighting flashbacks and whatnot. So people tease me because every time I buy a book, I buy two of them. One I write on and the other one I don't touch. I leave it in the shelf. So that was the best instructor I had, just reading from the great authors out there.
Well, and Lori, we'll make sure that Lori knows about this interview too, because she is really, a craftswoman, and she really works hard at what she's doing. But and your book echoes that concern with history that Chains does. The whole Chains trilogy, she really looked into the founding fathers, and if people don't know the book, every book in Chains, every chapter starts with a little epigraph from a historical document, right? So she even further anchors it in a way that's hard to deny the theme. So yeah, we'll make sure that she knows that she was referenced in this. And there's others. I think of another writer who I think is a really great craftswoman is A.S. King, who's really, really crafts out a plot. Kimberly Willis Holt is another one who crafts out things. So you have fine company, right?
Oh yeah, you should see, yeah, all the books, the stack of books I studied. Avi was one of with his Crispin.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I love that story. So a lot of books. Yeah, there are great books out there. I felt so lucky to to have.
So now I'm sensing a blog post from you about young adult fiction that inspired my love of writing, or inspired my ability to take on the barefoot dreams of Petra. Because you're mentioning books that obviously Crispin. I mean, people sometimes when a book in young adult literature or children's literature gets of a certain age, it's not picked up the same way. But that's a great book, right? And I think, oh yeah. So maybe you and I should talk about, you write a post about those books we shouldn't let slide away, right?
Exactly. Yes, because they open doors to these worlds that nobody talks about. Medieval England, and you don't stop and think. We take for granted what we have nowadays, and any door in history lets you appreciate what you have.
Yeah, I think that was great. So along this way, as you become, a scientist and train your mind differently, were you always kind of reading or telling stories, or, did you read for escape, and did you read children's and young adult, or were you just kind of reading other authors along the way?
I did. I read children's and young adult, especially if they were science-based. I enjoyed that, like The Wrinkle in Time, those were my favorites. And for adults, I read Contact, which was written by a physicist, himself. So I really, Carl Sagan, it was a physicist. So I really enjoyed books that weave science into the story. And on the side, I was writing a lot of essays for fellowships and scholarships, and yeah, I had to tell my bio, and I also had to propose a project and spin it. There's a story in there, trying to sell and pitch that proposal so that I could get the funding. And when I look back, I realized I've been a writer all this time, So it's a different way of seeing it. Of course, when I started writing and I would take my work to critiques during conferences, one of the first things I'd always get is like, can you add more emotion, please? Can you make us feel this? And okay, so that's something that took work just because of my analytical perspective, that I was used to. But yeah, it's an interesting journey.
That's great. So what kind of writing process do you have? I know that you've talked in the interviews, the questions you sent me about dissecting and taking paragraphs apart and trying to see those. But if you're calling yourself a writer, what kind of routines do you have, or patterns, or are you still trying to, catch when catch can, or what's your process?
Yes, for when I have a story, when I started, I'd like to have the end in mind. I guess it's just the engineer in me, I like to see where I'm headed. I have to have the blueprints and the plans or the flow chart, because I did electronics too. So with electronics, I like having those flow charts. And the same thing, well, they do the yes, if they do it, yes, well, what could be the outcome? So I end up breaking up like that. But at the end, I need to know something that it may change. I tell myself that, it's not a hard set rule. It could change, but at least there's a guide there that lets me know what I'm heading for, or at least the essence of the theme that I want. So
you storyboard a lot, you plot, or try to get those things done. So you try to write every day. You have a word count or a page count, or what's your monitor of productivity?
It varies. I have 2 young kids and a husband who travels a lot, and we're not anymore, but we were moving every 2 years because we're a military family, and always packing and unpacking. The kids has been gone, and in between I was trying to write. So if the kids back then, if they took a nap, that's when I wrote at night and whatnot. Now that they're in school, it helps. As soon as the youngest one started school, I said, okay, now I could start writing. That's when COVID came in. So I just threw that out of the window. So to this point, I'm still scrambling to find a routine, but it gets done at the end of the day, some way, somehow. It just, either I stay up later, wake up earlier, or, just juggling. So, but I'm used to that.
So do you try to get I'm imagining if you plot the whole thing, so do you try to get what some people might call a sloppy copy done and then go back and revise? Or are you trying to make, are you one of those that, okay, I've written a page, now I'm going to make that page perfect, or I'm going to written a chapter, I'm going to make this chapter perfect? So what's your process with that?
That would be me. I don't know if it's that engineering perfectionist thing that I write something and it nags at me. You know, if I know there's something there, I can't go on until I go back. But I have to train myself not to do that, you know, because otherwise I'm not going to get done. And
right.
And I had the luxury before with book 1 to take my time. But with book 2, there's a deadline, a hard set deadline. I have to turn that in. So now, as much as part of me wants to, you know, scroll up again to see what I wrote, nope, you know, I just keep going, and we'll go over it later, you know, just so it's a training still that I'm doing right now, trying to tell myself, you know, get in this mindset, otherwise you're not going to get it done.
I think that's true. It's so interesting. That's one of the things that's most interesting to me. I was for an English teacher, I always loved to read, but I was a reluctant writer. And so when I was teaching high school, I used to tell kids, look, if I can write, if I can graduate from college as an English major, most of you can, because, you know, I still can't spell well. I can't, you know, the greatest invention in my life was spell check, you know. I think it's great. But so I'm always interested in the process of people who can, you know, find the way to get things down. And even when I became an academic, I mean, I was in the classroom 25 years, and I told my friends, I said, you know, if I'm back in 3 or 4 years or 5 years, it's not because I hated the weather, it's because I can't write. I can't write an academic paper. I can't get it down, right? So I still find myself drifting to the kind of writing I like to do. That's why the blog has been important to me, because I can get my opinion and my voice out in a way that is you're guarded more in academic writing, right? So you have to do that. And so the young adult literature has been a really good fit for me, but still, my mantra is there's no such thing as writing, it's only rewriting, you know, because
exactly.
Once you got it down, if you really think you're happy with it, well, read it again, and then you'll go, oh. In fact, I just heard on Facebook, Andrew Smith pointed out that, you know, that's the hardest thing he has to do, because he's still teaching high school this year. I think it's maybe his last year, but he says it's getting kids to reread and look at their writing carefully. Like it's your writing, right? Do you want to fix it? Do you want to make it better? And I think a lot of kids don't think anything they do for a teacher is authentic writing, right? So it's just to fulfill an assignment. And I did a letter exchange with a teacher in Alaska where we were both reading the same Dickens book serially, and then our students were pen pals. So after each installment, they would write to each other. Well, we found that some of our students did their best writing when they were writing their pen pal letters to somebody in another state, right? Because this was their opinion about the book or what they were doing or what our class was doing versus their class. Because we never consulted on how we taught the book. We just each taught it on this time frame and then let our students go back and forth. But I think authentic writing is hard. And, you know, writers like you, when you're doing this, you say, oh, I own it so much, I have to let some of that go, right? Until I get to the end. So.
Yes. And I think it's the passion too. I think when the student finds, like you said, there's a passion there to connect with someone from another state. Yeah. So you put more into it, more energy and more because of that passion, that need to communicate.
And they don't want to look inadequate to somebody, right? You know, they want to, and this was way before we were doing hard letters and sending them in. We didn't have email accounts when we were doing this. Yeah, this was kids writing them and sending them off, right? And putting them in a big packet. So they had to, you know, they certainly had word processors and, you know, they could type it and do that. But it was own your writing, right? Own your own writing is very hard to do for a lot of people. So what's next? This book's out in the world in, you know, a couple of weeks from when we're having this conversation on the 14th of September, 2021. But what's next?
So next is for this one, come January, I'm gonna start working on the translation. So yeah, so I've started a little bit because I just can't help it. You know, I love writing in Spanish and especially translating because I used to translate a lot for my mom. And then in high school too, if I had friends, moms that were in there and the teachers would call me to translate, and I love doing that. I just love interpreting. So this to me is a dream come true that they gave me the opportunity to translate, and I'll start that in January. And I'm also working on book 2, which is the follow-up to Barefoot Dreams of Petra. And this book 1 is all in Mexico during the Mexican Revolution, and then she comes to the States. It ends there. And book 2 follows her at the refugee camp, which is the same refugee camp my great-grandmother was in Eagle Pass, Texas. And but unlike my great-grandmother, Petra follows the refugee wave to San Antonio, Texas, who at that time, San Antonio ended up with 30,000 refugees within the span of a year.
Yeah.
And I wondered, okay, what would a 12-year-old refugee girl do in this city at this time with the resources available to her? So again, the research, you know, what was in San Antonio at that time, what aid, what help, what jobs. And I loved it. I found it like a challenge trying to throw her into that and figure her way out. So that's what's coming up next year, September of 2022. It's when book 2 is going to get published. So far it's Untitled, but we're figuring that out.
Good. Well, she needs a continuing story, that's for sure. And I love that you're translating it. So you don't have fear and trepidation of having written it in English and then writing it into Spanish?
I do. It's a challenge for both because I grew up in the States, so my English was limited trying to learn it, and then it was limited because I was in school in Mexico. So I feel like, you know, I'm halfway in both of them. I'm not truly fully, but I do. I have my mom who's going to help me out in a lot of it.
Oh, okay. So
thank goodness, and some friends that are going to help me out when I get stuck. But yeah, I do enjoy. Doing that. I'm looking forward to it's a challenge. It's going to be a challenge. But
it's my Spanish is old and weak, but I would love to read this book in Spanish. Now, so what does Sourcebook plan to do? Do they plan to release it in Spanish just in the States, or are they going to push it in Mexico and Central America? What is their avenue to do international rights?
I think they have North American rights. So that's going to be, the U.S. There's going to be a push because there's demand for books in Spanish here in the United States. It is. And in Mexico, I'm hoping that there'll be a push for it there. I don't know how they're going to receive it or not, or, you know, I'm still wondering about that. But I would hope that they actually do a push down there as well.
Yeah, I would be really interested in following up on that and see what happens, because I think that's great. And I also think that in, you know, other throughout South America, this might be a really interesting historical piece, the same way we read historical pieces about different countries as well, right? So I hope they figure out a way to push it and into Spain, right?
I hope so. Yeah, this book itself, even in English, I have some phrases in here that are in Spanish, but the phrases are very regional. They're very Northern Mexican. So people who grew up in Northern Mexico could see that, it could sense it, you know, that it does hit home in that region. And I'm hoping to do that in the Spanish version as well. To keep it more dialectic to
Northern Mexico than but I think there's a lot of possibilities for you to do interesting things. So you have a pretty full plate right now with the second book that you're trying to, I guess you're close to the editing stages of all of this, right? Of the second book?
Yeah, second book is complete, and right now we're in the first. I just got my editorial letter, the long letter, which is great because I had Molly Cusick as an editor for this book. She left Sourcebooks. So now I have Wendy McClure, and she's wonderful. I lucked out, you know, again, because I was really nervous, you know, before book launch to have that editor leave. Oh my goodness, I was shaking and whatnot, but no, Wendy is wonderful and great. So I'm excited to be working with her, and she came back and was spot on and a lot of stuff.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's good, and I think it's really encouraging that they wanted a follow-up book right away, right, even before the release. And I think that's a really powerful telling sign for you to do that. So you're available to do school visits, you're anxious to get out there, and I hope, you know, if I can help in any way, I would help do that, or I would encourage people to consider using this as well. Now, where do you fall on thinking about own voices authors and all of that? And clearly this is an own voices book, right? So I also think this is a book that touches on all the things that some people are worried about. It talks, I would say in many ways, it's a book about poverty and lack of opportunity as well in the midst of this, but in some ways it's just survival, right, to begin with. So how do you want readers to take it up? As we've talked a lot about historical fiction, but do you think there's connections that you hope they make to contemporary issues? Because you can't get away that all these issues are all over the world right now, right? We're watching them play out in Afghanistan, right? When I'm reading this last week and talking about a bridge closed, right? And people can't get over, and people on one side and people on the other, I thought, well, yeah, that's pretty contemporary, right? So,
yeah, same here. When I saw that airport in Kabul and the people, that desperation,
yeah,
it brought me to tears just thinking of my great grandmother, what she must have felt at that moment. You know, that life or death, that it's right behind you. You know, and you got to run. You got to make, you know, just save yourself at that moment. So, yes, what I hope to do with the book is to let readers know that this type of situation or problems or strives are not unique to a certain group of people or culture or race or even a time. You know, like you said, it's happening right now somewhere else completely different. So it's stuff that happens, that repeats itself. And if we could let the generations know, maybe their ancestors went through something similar, whether it be the Irish famine, you know, people coming here because of that, or Syria, you know, the refugees going to Europe. And I want them to see that in their histories, and also to empathize with people, because it's happening right now. And maybe the young generations could figure out ways to solve or avoid situations like that in the future. So that would be my biggest hope.
You touched on this a little bit before. That's going to play out in the second book, but you know, we sometimes want to imagine refugees as older. Well, they're often children, right? And the history of immigrants in this country have not always been adults. They've been sometimes very young women or young boys. I have my own great grandfather came from Switzerland at age 14 and was charged with earning the money to get the rest of the family over, right? But he was the oldest who could come over on child's fare, you know, to migrate to Utah. And so here's this 14-year-old boy, you know, and he died in 58 at about 95. So he was coming over in about 1870, you know, something like that. And at 14, right? And his job was, well, get a job, and, you know, and slowly two more brothers came, and they were stonemasons. And they built in Utah a lot of the stone buildings that were there in the period, many of them still standing, right? But these were people who, so I'm really interested in, when I watch the things from Afghanistan, some of these kids that are alone, they don't know where their parents are now, right? And they've been clever enough or lucky enough to get into the airport. And I think that we sometimes discount the ability, the tenaciousness, the curiosity, right, of adolescents where sometimes we could say, given the circumstances, many of them try to rise, right? And it's maybe in the world today, we need to be more open to how we let people rise, how we help them rise, instead of saying, no, you can't rise, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think as adults, sometimes we limit children. You know, we don't think they're capable of things, but they are. If we give them the space to figure things out, they can. They're those surprises. They're amazes, and throughout history, And that's another thing I like to tell, that how when children are put in positions like that of turmoil and whatnot, they grow up quickly, really, really quickly. And almost they'll be talking like adults. I've met some kids that are 12, 13 that, oh my goodness, it just blew me away, you know,
Right.
that they're 30. And it's just that life pushed them to grow up fast, you know, because of the circumstances. So that's something that I want young, especially young readers, to realize that no, they're capable of, you know, overcoming, and with determination, whatnot, they're stronger than what they believe. So.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly been great to talk with you. And I have a question for you that I've been asking a lot of people as kind of a final interview question. If you could have dinner with 3 authors, living or dead, children, young adult, or anything else, you know, who would you invite to have a dinner conversation? What 3 people would you like in the room around you to have that conversation?
Oh my Lord, that's a good one.
Well, take a minute. You can take a minute and think about it, right?
Oh, I mean, I used to think about it that way before. You know, when I used to do physics, I used to think Carl Sagan. I want him there. Richard Feynman. I wanted him there, and Einstein. You know, I wanted all 3 there. But now with all, I guess they're all authors too.
Right.
But my goodness. I would say probably the bell jar. What's her name?
Oh, Sylvia Plath.
I just, such a great book, and all the turmoil that was going in her mind.
Yeah.
I just would love to have a chat with her and see what was going on. You know.
Yeah. When
she wrote the book, and because it is daunting when you write a book and trying to have kids and juggle this and that. So it's someone I think I would kind of find out what would happen, you know, because you're such a great writer, and I loved her book. So
yeah,
and whatnot. And I'd have to say probably Jane Austen too, just of what she accomplished back then, when it was just so difficult for women to write and be published and whatnot, and their accomplishments. And oh my goodness, just so many. I think of all these women and men, and I can. And probably one of my favorite children authors was Kate DiCamillo. So, you know, I just love the innocence in her characters, and how she brings that across. So yeah, I think that would be. I think that's a whole party now. That's
a whole party. And Kate would probably love being there. I think that. So many of her books I love because of Winn-Dixie, and some of these books I just think, just like you say, they capture the gentleness in the hearts of so many of these characters, right? So well, that's fantastic. So I hope you get to have that imaginary dinner sometime, and that'd be great.
That's great.
It would be wonderful. So that it's been wonderful to talk with you, and this will be, I think, a really fun interview for people to listen to, and I hope it directs a lot of people to your book, and we'll keep track of it, and you should do what Margie's been doing. Her book's been coming out, and I still want to plan to interview her, but you need to do all that Facebook sharing, right? All that Instagram thing. She's been really good at sharing, right?
I just started. I don't know if you followed me on Instagram, but 6 days ago, since we're 30 days away from the book launch, every day I'm posting a picture.
Well, yeah, make sure that you email me your Instagram account. I'll make sure to follow it, and then I can cut and paste some pictures for the blog post in there, so that we can direct people to your Instagram account as well.
Yeah, I figured everybody's doing it, so I got to jump in.
Yeah, it's like my daughter says, you need to use Instagram more. I said, it's all I can do to get up in the morning, let alone, do Instagram. I'm doing the best I can with what I've got, but it's fun to do this. So it's been great to talk to you. I hope we get a chance to talk to you again, and I hope to see you at NCTE or Allen in the future, and we'll have some more conversations in person. right? Because we've done everything.
Fingers
We,
crossed.
we feel like we're friends and we've never physically met, right, in the same place, right? So
I never say but there's so many people, but no, thank you. I appreciate the time and the interview and all your readerships and people listening and viewing us. Thank you so much for doing
no,
this.
I really, I just read this and I just thought, oh, wow. And I read this on the heels of Padma Venkataraman's new book that we're also going to highlight. And I think these are two books that would be really good together, of middle grade kids overcoming. You know, it's really, she's done a very nice job again with another middle grades book. And so these are books that I think hers comes out the week before yours, right? Actually, so it's like, you know, they're coming and they're coming. And I think what a gift that so many great middle grade books are coming around, right? And I think this is just right up there. It ought to be, you know, talked about and spread around. So good luck, Alda, and best of everything for you in your writing career. And I can't wait to read the next one now. So it's good.
Thank you so much.
All right. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.